Yitzi, I bet you think you know the story of Korach.
Well, as we said last week, sometimes when you know the story, you don't notice the details.
So this week, Parashat Korach here in Eretz Yisrael. Last year, we discussed the story of the Nesi'im and their staffs that blossomed. This year, I want to talk about the beginning of the Parasha, about the actual story of Korach, because this is one of those stories that we know since kindergarten, and since we've known it for so many years and heard it so many times we miss out the details within the story itself, within the Psukim themselves. And when looking at this week's Parasha, there are many questions that come to mind. Above all is, where did this idea of the land opening up come from? Because as we know the story, Korach came and challenged Moshe, and then the land opened up and swallowed him and everything that he owned. But when looking at the Psukim, this is not what was planned to be. When Korach came and challenged Moshe, Moshe responded with, you know what? Show up tomorrow with your pans, with the ktoret, with the essence, the shovels with those essence, and let's see who Hashem chooses. And then we have a whole story, and only after that, suddenly Moshe says that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a new Bria, creates a new creation, then we will know who is chosen, and then the land opens up and Korach and his people fall into it. And you have to ask yourself, what happened to the original plan from Moshe? Why wasn't that plan executed? Why did we need this story of the land opening up in order to convince Am Yisrael, in order to convince Korach that Moshe was chosen to lead and Aharon and the Kohanim were chosen to be Kohanim? Where did this idea of the land opening up come from? It wasn't there in the beginning when Moshe suggested to do the pan test in order to see who Hashem chose. So why suddenly is this the test that Moshe is using? But even more so, right after it, fire does come down from the sky and burns up all the 250 people around them, which kind of seems to be the opposite of what Moshe suggested. Moshe wanted that the one to be chosen will have fire on his pan, yet now we have 250 people that are being burnt by this fire. So what exactly is going on over here in the story of Korach? Why does Moshe need this new Bria, new creation to happen with the land opening up? Why wasn't the test of the pan enough to show that Moshe was chosen? And why did the test flip, and instead of choosing the one, ended up burning all the 250 people around Korach?
It's very interesting, and I think to truly understand this, we need to understand more deeply the battle that's going on here between Korach and between Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Korach is coming with this concept of Kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, which basically means everyone is the same, everyone is holy. Why do you make these separations? Why do you have Levi? Why do you have Kohanim? Why do you have Aaron? Why do you have you taking these roles? What is this all about? Everyone's the same. Let's mix everyone together. Everyone should be a part of the Avodah in the Mishkan. Everyone should be exactly the same. It's about mixing everything together. While Moshe Rabbeinu seems to be representing something else, a word that repeats itself again and again in so many forms and ways in our Parsha is the concept of lehibadel, havdalah, separation, the concept of separating. He turns to Korach and says, Korach, Hashem separated you from everyone else and gave you a special role. And this word again, separate, and it comes in all different shapes and forms. We see that when Korach comes the next day, he brings everyone with him. Again, this idea of mixing everything together, bringing everything together. And then Hashem says to Moshe, Hibadlu mitoch ha'eda, you separate yourself from this whole crowd because I'm going to destroy this crowd. And Moshe says, no. One person sinned and you're going to destroy the crowd. Again, don't mix the whole crowd together. There's a separation here. There's the one who sinned and there's everyone else. Again, this constant concept of you separate yourself. No, let's separate the sinner from the crowd. This constant balance. And then Moshe tells Am Yisrael to separate themselves from Datan, Aviram, and Korach. And only then comes this concept where Moshe says that if Hashem will create this new Bria, this new creation, that the earth will open up and swallow them, then you're going to know that Hashem sent me to do this. And this separation concept continues. And we'll see something interesting. They come as a group, but even right from the beginning, Moshe speaks to all of them, but then separately goes to Korach and says to Korach what he wants to say to Korach, then goes to or calls Datan v'Aviram over and they don't come, but tries to speak separately to Datan v'Aviram. And also in this punishment, which starts as a group, as you said, everyone should bring their pan with the ktoret, and tomorrow we'll see, but ends up separating between different groups. There are different groups here with different issues. So we see this concept of everyone's the same, everything together together, which we know is sometimes true. We know there's value in lahakil, which is a word we learned from Moshe, Vayakil Moshe et Adat Israel, where he brings Am Israel together. And Korach keeps trying to makil. He's bringing everything together, everyone together. And Moshe is saying it doesn't work like that. There's importance in separation for the good, separation for the bad. And maybe that's what's happening here. At the beginning, it seems they're coming with good intentions. We want to all be holy. We want to all participate in the Mishkan. And Moshe says, that's not like that. You, the Levim, have a special role. You were separated for your special role. Aaron has his special role. And you'll see, you'll all come, and it won't be fit for everyone. And you ask, why didn't the fire come down just to Aaron's hand, and instead the fire came down and burnt everyone? Because that's exactly what it's saying. It's saying not everyone is fit for every role. Everyone is born with their special shlichut, with their special role, with what they're supposed to bring in the world. And if you go and try to do someone else's role, you may be burnt by it. It may not fit you. It may be not right for you. And that's what happens to them. But on the way to getting there, when the reasons behind this stop only being positive ones, as we see from Datan v'Abiram, who start complaining about, why did you take us out of Mitzrayim, and all different other complaints, Hashem also teaches them the other side of things. You think everything's mixed together? Great. So I'm going to destroy all of you together. There's no difference. Everything's mixed together. The sinner, the non-sinners, everyone's just one. Then I'm going to just destroy everything together. And maybe when Moshe comes and says, I need to create this new creation, and he says it, we don't see Hashem telling him, but maybe Hashem did tell him. Because when Hashem told him, listen, you separate yourself, I'm going to destroy all of them together, Moshe realizes that he needs to teach Am Yisrael the separation. And that's why he says, not for Korach. He's not going to make this big miracle just to punish. There's other punishments. We don't need miracles for punishment. The miracle is about saving Am Yisrael. The miracle is about teaching Am Yisrael, don't mix everything together. Separate yourself. Look at who you are. Look at what they are. Separate yourself. The concept of a bria, by the way, we know in Aramaic, bria, bara, is to take something out. Is when something comes out. It's a separation. The world we know started with tohu vavo, with everything mixed together. Saying, Moshe, Korach, what you're doing you think is positive, but you're actually creating tohu vavo. You're mixing everything together, which can only bring destruction. It'll bring destruction because when everyone's following the same thing, then they'll follow the sinners. It can bring destruction because everyone's going to try to be what they're not and may be burnt by trying to be what they're not. The creation comes, the bria comes after the tohu vavo. When everything's mixed together, then Hashem starts creating, and he separates this and he separates that, and this creation and that creation. All of creation is about separation. Godliness is one. There was nothing in the world. There was only one, and then there's a bria and another bria, and each step is another separation. This separation is key to growth, is key to putting each thing in its right place and allowing each thing to grow as it should and not get mixed in with other people and other roles and other things that other people should do. Being able to be yourself, focus on what you should be, that's the concept of Havdalah, and this seems to be the true battle between Korach and Moshe.
So very true, really, really true. Like you're saying, when you look at the Psukim, again, it's very clear that Korach is trying to mix everything up. It's not only him and Levi'im, he's taking Reuven, he's taking this, he's taking that, and he's coming to Moshe Rabbeinu also, according to the Midrash, with his questions. If you have a room full of Sifrei Torah, you need a mezuzah. If you have a tzitzis all blue, if the whole garment is blue, do you really need that thread, that string to be blue, to be separated blue? Why isn't having everything blue good enough? Why do you need a separate thing? This is what Korach was trying to push. This is his agenda that he was trying to push to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe, this is what he's teaching over here. Like you were saying, you see it throughout the entire Parsha with the Hibadelu, but also the concepts of Edah, Kahal, all these ideas of having groups within groups. When is it okay to have it, and when is it not okay? And really, the Mishnah later on teaches us exactly this point. Kol machloket shehi l'shem shamayim sofa lihitkayem. Anytime that you have a separation that's there l'shem shamayim, it is a good separation and it will be lasting. Every disagreement that has a pure purpose behind it, a pure godly purpose behind it, with no personal agendas to it, with no personal ideas behind it, really purely l'shem shamayim, will be everlasting, will last forever. And you have to ask yourself, how can that be? Don't we want peace? We thought that in order to have unity and last forever, we have to have peace. We have to all agree with each other. We can't live with disagreement. We can't live separated from each other. But maybe this is exactly the point. Maybe this is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us over here. You have to have a sense of separation sometimes. You have to know when to draw the lines and have the borders between different ideas. And it's okay to draw the lines. It's okay to have different groups when it's done l'shem shamayim. But even more so, you have to learn to draw the lines in order to reach your goal, in order to reach your destiny, in order to reach what you have to fulfill in this world, because you cannot have a great mix-up. You cannot have a tov vavo, like you were saying, and it goes way deeper than this, like you were saying, with the days of the Bria, where each day is a separation in reality. But let's take it to a simpler level. When we know with Havdalah, every Motzei Shabbat, when we say Havdalah, we also separate the day of the week. We separate the reality of Shabbat from the reality of the 6 days of the week, and we do that using a new Bria, using fire, which is considered the first creation of man in this world, the first creation that the human being brought into this world through the secret that HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught us. And the bracha that we make on Motzei Shabbat specifically is on the Esh, because this was a creation that was made on Motzei Shabbat in order to separate the day of the week, in order to separate Shabbat from the other days. And this is what Moshe is showing Am Yisrael over here. Each one of us has a purpose in this world. Each one of us has a job in this world to fulfill something they have to do. And it's okay to be separated as long as we're all together moving towards the one goal we all have as a nation that we're striving for. And also we should remember the important piece that Rav Kook writes down that we've bought several times already, but it's so crucial to understanding what is a l'shem shamayim machloket, what is a good disagreement between people. As Rav Kook says, that Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam, we have the famous Gemara, and Rav Kook explains, how can it be that Talmidei Chachamim, who argue all the time, are actually bringing peace into this world? It doesn't make sense, especially in today's logic. Peace is when everybody thinks the same and everybody does the same. But explains Rav Kook that the idea behind this is that you have Talmidei Chachamim, each one representing an idea that they believe is a Shem Shamayim and is clean 100% from personal agendas, is clean from their personal perspective, and they're really representing this godly idea in a pure sense. If you have those two sides and they're fighting each other, this is a good disagreement, because then they sharpen each other's side, then they sharpen the ideas, and they help understand better what each one represents and what are the good sides in each one. And understanding this, then you can live in harmony together. And this is, for example, why even though we have the biggest machlokas in Shas between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, they still lived with each other and still married each other. And you can imagine today, when you have one family keeping a certain kashrus and a different family keeping another kashrus, they will not marry each other. Yet Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, they had even bigger disagreement than kashrus, and still they did marry each other. They still lived with each other, because by them, by Hillel and Shammai, it was purely l'shem shamayim, 100% clean from any of the personal feelings, any of the personal thoughts. This is what a good machloket means. And as Rav Kook continues and says, this is the only way to have peace, when each side lives according to their ideas and sharpens their side the best and the most, but they live together with the other side. They live together in order to bring the greater goal, the greater reality into this world. And maybe this is what Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching Korach, teaching Am Yisrael, and also teaching us in this week's Parsha, is that a Havdalah, that a separation is actually a good thing. Having the very clear lines, the very clear borders, what you are, what you're not, what that person is, what they're not, is something that's needed in this world in order to have all the different groups together, in order to bring the better reality, in order to bring the new creation in this world, in order for all of us together to reach the ultimate goal of doing good in this world. Because without this, you'll have tovavo, you'll have a great mix-up. No one will know where to go, what to do, what the purpose is. Everyone will be lost and end up going into the ground instead of climbing up higher.
You know, it's very interesting what you're saying about the concept that not everyone has to be the same to bring peace, to bring greater good. The opposite. Sometimes everyone has to be themselves, have to represent themselves. And it's interesting because in our world, it's common to say, you see someone else and you say, they're just like you, meaning you should respect them. Why? Because they're just like you. People don't realize how messed up that sentence actually is. It's basically saying that if they're not like you, then you shouldn't respect them. Then they're nothing. Then they're bad. They're evil. Meaning don't treat them badly because they're just like you. It should be the opposite. They're not like you. They don't have to be like you. They're something else. They're different. They can think differently. It's okay to think differently. It's okay that you're focused on one thing and they're focused on another, as long as there's true meaning. Because yes, that's true and that's true. And it's fine that you don't see their side because you're different. You're a different person and you see things differently and you grew up differently, and that's great. That's part of what the world is. You know, we have an interesting bring bracha when we see a large group of people. Why? Because when we see a large group of people, we see the differences. We see keshem shepaltzufehem shonim, just like their faces are different, kach deotehem shonot, so are their thoughts, their minds. When we see this many, when we see the different aspects, and we know it all comes from one God who created a world with so many different colors and so many different aspects, then we see the beauty of the world. Not when everyone's the same, not when it's okay because they're just like you. No, they're not just like you. They should stay different than you. You should be a Kohen, you should be a Levi, you should do your thing, they should be them, and only then together you can have true peace. When everyone respects the difference, respects someone else's place, that's when true peace, that's when true growth, as you're saying, can really come into this world.
Beautiful, exactly. And like we've said many times on the channel, that's when real harmony comes into the world. Real harmony is created when you have different notes. That's when you have beautiful music. When you have one note all the time, it sounds terrible. And also when you're off key and you're hitting the wrong notes, it also sounds terrible. You have to be within the lines, you have to be within the borders, but you can have as many beautiful notes within those borders, within those lines, and that's how you create the beautiful harmony. But we're out of time, so we'll have to end here. There's so much more to talk about this topic, obviously, especially now in Israel when we're going into elections. As usual, if you enjoyed these videos, please feel free to comment below. Tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like, tell us if you have any other answers to the questions we've asked. Also, feel free to like the video, share it with a friend, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and help us grow this channel. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and Emir Hashem. We'll talk again next week.